This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. This episode is sponsored by C-School, the online school for creativity training. If you'd like to unleash your creative potential and access a free Creativity Blueprint training series, then just head over to c.school. That's www.c.school for your free training series. In today's episode, I speak with Bryan Falchuk, and we speak about self-love, setting your intention, and finding your why. Enjoy this episode. Hi, it's James Taylor, and I am delighted today to be joined by Bryan Falchuk. Bryan is a life and executive coach, public speaker, C-level executive, and the best-selling author of Do a Day, in which he teaches how to overcome challenges and achieve goals. Bryan spent the most of his life obese and overcome by anxiety until he discovered the approach to change all of that, Do a Day, which he teaches in his book. Bryan's work has appeared in many major publications like the LA Times, Chicago Tribune, Inc. magazine, and many, many more. And he's been featured as a guest on over 100 podcasts and radio shows. He has also shared his message across many stages, including multiple TEDx events. And it's my great pleasure to have Bryan join us today. So welcome, Bryan.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, James.
So share with everyone what's going on in your life just now.
A lot. I think with everything you just recited, it's very full, but that's all right. I mean, I'm living a life aligned with my purpose, which I'm very blessed to say, and that's why I push as hard as I do. I'm just trying to get that message out as much as I can because I've seen it help people turn their life around. So I want to do more of that.
So for people that don't know you, so I was watching you have a great TEDx talk. I was watching
Thank
recently,
you.
and it's interesting because different TEDx speakers have different kind of ways they approach giving a TED talk. And I felt yours was almost you were really like having a conversation with the audience. It was a very heartfelt TEDx. A lot of them are kind of facts and figures and everything. It literally felt like you just kind of got up on stage and you were just telling your story. This is what happened. This is why it's important. But I'm guessing there was a lot of late nights and hard work behind crafting that TEDx.
Well, so I don't want to disappoint anyone, but not really.
So you're naturally that talented.
No, it's not to say I didn't prepare or anything like that. Of course I did. But the style that you saw on stage is the style of my book. It's the style of the articles that I write, the interviews I do. I'm talking about what I believe in and what I know. And if you speak from what you know, you don't really need a script. You don't need excessive preparation, because if you do, then you probably shouldn't be speaking. That's how I see it. So for me, it was very much, yes, I needed to make sure I could get in under the time constraints and that I knew generally what I wanted to say and where to transition the slides and all that bit. But the core of what I needed to say, I know that, and I know that cold because I've been talking about it for years, and it's my life. So if you can't talk about your life naturally, then maybe there's something about your life that's getting in the way of that.
And watching that, I thought I could watch that on a couple of different levels. There was the very humanistic story you were telling about your life and your wife, and we'll kind of get into that and what that story was and where that ended up taking you as well. And then there was the kind of very obvious one about why people overeat. Why so many people in society are obese and struggle with food and their relationship with food as well. So for anyone that maybe hasn't had a chance to watch this TEDx yet, and I'm sure they will go and watch it afterwards, can you just give us the highlights of that story and that journey that ended up you being on that stage that day? Yeah.
So I, like a lot of people, at least in the US, and let's face it, modern society, this is very common. I grew up with parents who were getting divorced. It's about half the US, and plenty of people in other countries get divorced. And I was the youngest of 4 kids. So it was really too young. I was like 5 years old. I couldn't fully understand what was happening. But what I knew was that things weren't okay, and they were sort of coming apart at the seams, and there was really nothing I could do about it myself. Of course not. I was a little kid. And my parents were so full on with the divorce and 3 other kids in the household that they couldn't really attend to my emotional needs. in the way that I needed them to. And, not that I understood any of that at the time, but that's what was going on. And so I had to turn somewhere else for that stability and that sense of comfort. And I turned to food. And, little by little, or not even little by little, it was pretty fast and pretty severe. I put on a lot of weight because when you're eating to fill an emotional gap or an emotional hole, the reason why you've eaten isn't satisfied by the eating. So as soon as you're done, you need to go back for more. And that's exactly what I did. So I got to a point where I was about 100 pounds more than I weigh now. And more importantly than just the weight side of it, the weight was a symptom, really. The issue is I had this extreme anxiety about what was going to go wrong and how it was going to affect my life and what I couldn't do about it. And that phrase in and of itself sums up most of my life until I had this wake up moment where it just became clear to me that this is no longer sustainable and I need to do better for the people I care about most, including myself.
And before you got to that wake up moment, you experienced where I guess a lot of people experience where they find someone, a mentor or a coach or someone that can help them with it, but then you kind of lost weight and then you kind of quickly put that weight back on as well.
Yeah. So I lost the 100 pounds in high school. I was 17, 18 years old when the weight came off through help from an amazing guy who worked at my school who ran our physical education program, which people, and I don't know how it is elsewhere, but in the States, that's generally kind of a blow off sport. It's the sport you do to get out of playing sports. And that's not the way he takes it. So he's all about education and helping you find what you actually care about and enjoy rather than, punishing you or just waiting till the clock runs out in the class so you can leave. And it worked. And that was beautiful. And I learned a lot about physical fitness and wellness, but I never dealt with the reasons why I was obese. And that's why, I lost a tremendous amount of weight in a fairly short amount of time, about a year, maybe 14 months. But the reason why I was obese was still there. So it came back, and it came back more slowly. But I got like about 45, 50 pounds of it back on and before I woke up. And if I didn't have that moment in 2011 that we'll get into, I'm sure, I'm sure I'd be well past the 100-pound point in terms of being obese now. Because
you said at one point, you said after you kind of gained that weight, you said you didn't look particularly obese. You said you just looked American, and I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Having lived in America, and it's very similar. I'm in the UK, and very quite similar in terms of obesity in the culture as well. And so you kind of don't look out of place. And I've got a lot of my friends and family that are in exactly that same position. They don't look obese, but they are overweight, and there's maybe other things that they're kind of struggling with as well. But that wasn't the main thing that kind of tipped you over to really say, okay, I need to look at the deep-seated causes behind this as well. So talk about what that event was that really changed things.
Yeah, so all that was just sort of background mindless noise. And I think that's why most people are just sort of slightly, unhealthy, obese, like to some extent, but not the extreme that I had been before. It's just sort of this general malaise in the population, if you will. So the wake up for me was I was 32 years old. This is the summer of 2011. My wife and I had a 2-year-old boy, and she got very, very sick. And we've come to find out she has a chronic illness. And I'll preface the story by saying she's still alive. And I need to say that because in 2011, it really didn't look that way. Her doctors had no idea what was going on. They had nothing they could do for her. They were very dismissive and blaming in the whole thing, just sort of saying, oh, you're just depressed, or you're doing this to yourself. Or, we can't find anything wrong. You're sure there's really these pains you're talking about? You're sure you're really throwing up as much as you say you are? And just sort of ridiculous. Not sort of, completely ridiculous. And it culminated in a phone call I got from her primary care doctor on June 30th telling me there's nothing more they can do. They don't know what it is. He's going on vacation. He'll call us in 6 weeks and take her to the emergency room if you need to. And he hung up. And she was losing 2 pounds a day. She was barely 100 pounds, and she's bedridden at that point. So she didn't have 6 weeks. And I went back into her room, and my son was in there, and he was looking at his mother in bed in pain. Looking very different from the vibrant woman who she had been just a few months before that. And when he turned and looked at me, that's when it all hit me. It's just, what am I doing? What am I doing relative to what she needs of me? What am I doing relative to what he needs of me? And for myself, I was living with such misery around all the things that were wrong and were going to go wrong and the impact on me, and just sort of telling the world, get out of my way. I have to do things to try to limit all of this downfall. And that included, these two people who just needed me to be supportive. I was doing things like, actions and taking care of them, but that's not what my wife needed. She needed that at a basic level, but she needed a husband to stand by her and to understand her and listen and support and validate how she was feeling, not to say, just sort of rushing past it and saying, well, I have to go do this, I have to do that. You need to get over it, or you need to just toughen up or whatever. That's not helpful. And my poor little son, he was about to be the child of a single parent. That's what it looked like. And not just like, it didn't just happen. He was watching his mother die in front of his eyes. So if you think about my issues with anxiety from my parents' divorce, imagine, when you're 2 years old and you watch your parent slip away right in front of you, to be left with your only parent, the guy that I was, it just, he'd have no hope at happiness. And all that just hit me all at once. It's just, I got to do better. And the difference this time was I actually wanted to do better, and I believed I deserved better, and that I was capable of it. And those are three things that I really had never felt before, through all my weight loss struggles or any other moment where I felt like everything's going wrong and how am I supposed to get through this? My feeling had always just been, well, that's who I am. I'm the guy who has things going wrong that has to get through them. Like, I'm the fixer. It made me really good at my job. I was a management consultant, so I was paid to go around finding problems and fixing them. Kind of maybe ironic or not ironic at all, that's what I ended up doing for a career for a good chunk of my time. But in terms of, being a human in a family, or even just a person in my non-work life, what a miserable, miserable way to feel all the time.
Do you think you would have got to that point of this, making that decision to switch and change, to kind of reevaluate what you were doing with your life and where you wanted to go with things, if you didn't have those other people there? So you could take it out of yourself. If it was just you, let's imagine if it was just you and you'd had some terrible illness, wasn't going to kill you, but just some terrible illness, do you think you would have just kind of gone into yourself more and just kind of self-pity and things? Did it require having those two other faces kind of looking at you to be able to say, we need you to be more?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question that honestly no one's ever asked me. If it was me, I would have been fine, because I'm always fine. And so I don't get in this place of, if it's just about me, I don't get worried, because I know I can get through it. I've been through my own tough health situation. I've had surgery 15 times. Which is kind of strange. Like, surgery is not meant to be a hobby, but apparently it is for me.
In America, it's a very expensive hobby. If you're going to have a hobby, it's a very expensive hobby.
God, yeah. So if it was about my own health, I don't think it would have woken me up, because I wouldn't have considered it a reason to wake up. I would have considered it validation of my approach. But if I didn't wake up in that moment for, whatever reason, I think short of someone coming into my world that would help me change and wake me up to seeing the need to change and the desire to, I think I would be 300 pounds and just the angriest guy on the planet, who got a lot done. There's no question. Like, I achieve a lot, but God, I'd just be miserable, and I'd be miserable to be with. So if my wife was still alive, I probably wouldn't get to be married to her anymore. And I'm not sure that if she still would have been alive or not. If I hadn't gone through some of the changes that I did, she took control of her own destiny. So I don't want to presume it's because of the changes that I made, but I can't know one way or the other whether she'd be here. But I just think about, if she wasn't and I didn't change, that poor boy. Like, my son's just the most amazing human I've ever met, and I'm completely biased, but it's a fact. It's not objective. It's not subjective. It's completely objective. He's just an incredible person, and I'm not sure he'd be that. And that is such a tremendous waste.
So as you started to make those changes in your life, how you lived your life, what your goals and aspirations were for yourself and in your family, was there something that was an inspiration for that? Or maybe was it someone maybe outside your family? Was there someone, a mentor, a guide, someone that could help you? Because it's very difficult to go on these journeys, especially if you're, regardless of whether it's to do with weight, or it could be transitioning to a new career, or going and living in a completely different country. It's often very useful to have a guide, someone that you can turn to and ask for advice when you're just not quite sure what the next step should be. Did you have that person in your life?
So I didn't in that moment. I was my guide, and I did a very good job of it because I was awoken. But once I got the ball rolling, then I was very lucky to, and someone I mentioned in the acknowledgement of the book, I had a career coach, an executive coach that my company had gotten me, who he and I got really close. And, even when the contract with the business was over, he still has stayed in touch with me and has been someone I turn to. So he helped me discover a lot about myself. But to be fair, I wasn't ready for him before. So if I hadn't been guiding myself and seeing my capability and capacity to change, and hadn't moved the needle on a number of things, it really wouldn't have made any difference whether he worked with me or not. So, and that's why with my coaching work, 'cause I coach a number of people in this space. I always say, like, I don't change lives. You're not doing this for me. I will help you change your life, but it's you. I can help you unlock that. But if you're not willing, if you're not accepting of it, if you don't think you deserve to have that change and that you're capable of it, then it really doesn't matter what I or any other coach does, because inside of you, consciously or subconsciously, you will be sabotaging and you'll be stopping it from happening. So I had gotten myself into a place of acceptance. And that's why I think he was able to help me move the needle even further. And
then in the book, you talk about these 4 areas about how you kind of transitioned and how you have this incredible life you have today as well. And you kind of, what you just said there, spoke about 2 of those parts. One was the finding your why. You wanted a better life for yourself and your family, and you kind of just beginning to find what that why is. The other point, even before that, is this idea of self-love. Now, coming from a management consulting background, I'm guessing the words like self-love does not usually get talked about much in the boardrooms of the corporate world. So why is that important? Why is it not good enough just to find the thing, find the why, and then start working and start executing? Why do we need to do any kind of work on ourselves first?
Well, and what's interesting is I released the book a year ago, actually. It's a year ago today or tomorrow, I forget. But it was a year ago, and self-love was not explicitly in the book. And I've since revised it for the 1-year anniversary. So it's in there now. So I will practice self-love and not be upset with myself for it. But it is so crucial, because I talk about building a house of success for your life, and the why is the foundation, right? That's like your true purpose to move forward. Incredibly important. You can't do it without having that purpose. However, when you build a house, you don't just pour a foundation anywhere. You have to find good ground for it. So, you don't build it on quicksand or marshland or something, because it'll sink and it'll crack. Self-love is that solid ground. So it's the basis. Without it, everything else will just fall apart. So it's, I was just saying this a moment ago. It's like, if you don't have self-love, you will sabotage, and you'll self-sabotage. You'll keep yourself from getting there. So the issue is, if you don't believe that you're capable of doing it, or that you deserve to have it, you'll stand in your way, whether you know it or not. And we're pretty bad at this as a society. We're very self-deprecating. I always use these 2 examples, but I think everyone really, they get it. It resonates. Is we end up in these fights with people over who has it worse. So you hear these conversations at work about whose boss is worse, or who worked later last night, or who's going to work more this weekend. And the winner's the one who's worse off, like who's more miserable. So that's just, right off the bat, societally, we praise the bad outcome. And that's one problem. The other problem to it is we don't take compliments. We don't allow for it. And we claim that that's humility, but actually, or we're trying not to be egotistical. But to me, an egotist is someone who seeks praise for that which they didn't actually do, or they weren't the reason why things were good. That's not the same thing as just not accepting compliments ever, or not allowing for anything good about yourself. So I always give the example of going to someone's house for dinner, and you say, oh, that was really delicious. Thanks for making dinner. And they'll say, oh, thanks, but I burnt the chicken, or I overcooked this, or I undercooked that, or undersea. It's like, just say thank you. Just allow for the idea that maybe possibly you created a really nice meal, I don't generally name this person, but my mother-in-law happens to be an incredibly thoughtful person who gives really nice gifts. The problem with her gift giving is right before she hands you the gift, she tells you what it is and why it's a terrible gift and why you won't like it. And it's like, I haven't even opened it yet, and I don't even get to enjoy it. Like, you've preemptively made everything terrible. When normally I'd open it and be like, wow, that was thank you. This is a really nice shirt or whatever. Thank you so much for thinking of me. But it's like, oh, it's probably the wrong size, and you're not going to like the color. It's like, oh, either you must think I'm like the biggest crab in the world, which is possible, but she'll do it to other people. But it's like, you don't even allow for something nice as a result of the nice gesture that you did. So we have to be better with that. And so the people I work with, I always tell them as a little tool, like, stop the but. As soon as someone says something nice about you, or you think something nice about you or your achievement, and that word but starts to form in your head, just stop. Like, stop speaking. Just say thank you and pause. Just allow for the good about you to be out there in the world. And the more you do that, the more comfortable you start to get with yourself being good enough. And then you start to reflect on, those moments where I would feel like everything is going to fall apart. Somehow, shockingly, I'm still alive and I'm not homeless. So is it really as terrible as I always think it is? No, because I'm far more capable than I seem to realize in all those difficult moments. Somehow I've gotten myself through all that stuff that seems so impossible. So, you recognize that capability and suddenly things become possible.
And then in the book, you then talk about, setting your intention as to what your intention is you're going to be doing. And then you move into this phrase, do a day. And this is then when you get down to the things that people can be doing every day in their lives to live a better life and really move towards that why and fulfill that why as well. Can you maybe give us some examples just now? And I mean, I'm thinking, much of our audience, they're doing maybe great creative work, or they're aspiring to do great creative work. That's as an entrepreneur, as a musician, as an artist, as a writer, as whatever, a coach, whatever they're doing, and they're trying to develop that kind of self-love. They're finally kind of found their why as to why they're doing it. They kind of know where they need to get to, but it's that disconnect between knowing where they want to get to and actually doing it on a consistent basis and kind of getting there. And that's kind of, I guess, what, the do a day. So can you give some little kind of insights into the do a day idea?
Yeah. So it's really an execution strategy. So the whole idea, the two words are really crucial here. I'm going to ignore in the middle, but if we start with the last word, day, that's about mindfulness. It's about being present in the current day, because that's all it ever is. It's never yesterday and it's never tomorrow. Yet we live our lives with all this baggage from yesterday, the pain of past failures, past things that we've had done to us or we've experienced, or something we've lost, or something we regret doing wrong. And at the same time, we pull that into today and we act from a place of all that pain, and we have all this anxiety and anticipation about tomorrow. So, it's like today might have been good, but what about, am I going to get the contract tomorrow? Or, what if I can't pay the rent next month? Or what if this or what if that? Well, you don't know if any of those things is going to happen. And most importantly, none of them is happening right now. So why are you living the current moment in all this anxiety and anticipation? And what you end up doing is you make really bad decisions when you make decisions from a place of anxiety, insecurity, and pain. And you throw away your ability to achieve anything right now because it's caught in the negatives of yesterday and tomorrow. So with do a day, if you think about, you named all these different contexts that people might be in. If you're an entrepreneur, maybe you failed in your last startup, and you can either learn from that and grow and be empowered by it and go after your current venture with knowledge and empowerment and understanding and attack it. Or you can go into it with this sort of tainting from the past where your failure has not washed off of you. And so you're going through everything with the suspicion that the money's going to run out, or your partner's going to screw you over, or, the vendors aren't going to come through or whatever. So you mistrust people. And I'm actually coaching someone who's in a startup right now, and that's exactly what's happening. Is every one of the founders is certain that the other founders are trying to screw them over and push them out, because they've all had that happen before with past ventures. And it's like, guys, that's yesterday. Like, you're pulling all that into today, and can you guess what's happening with their startup right now?
Yeah.
It's not really starting up.
And I get it's that thing that they always say for Formula One drivers, never look at the wall. Even if your car is out of control and you're going towards the wall, never look at the wall. Always look on the bit where you want to go, not on where maybe you, because it just, our brains look to fulfill things that are in our head. And it's if that entrepreneur is saying all that talk, or in a group they're saying all that in a talk, or if it's hidden underneath what's maybe not being said,
because they
then
won't
there's more
talk
chance
about
of
it.
it's going there.
Yeah, I mean, in any sport, that's one of the most common pieces of advice: is look where you want the ball or your body or whatever to go, or the car, or whatever it is. I'm a skier. I haven't skied in a few years, but I was a skier. I'm a cyclist. It's even running, you look where you're trying to get to, and your body will align. That's really, really valuable advice, and not just with movement and physical activity. In anything you do. If you're looking at all this past pain, guess where you're going to take the current moment? If you're looking at all these negative outcomes, you don't know if they're going to happen. But as you watch them and you direct yourself towards them, you're probably bringing them about, versus being able to pivot or protect yourself because you've had enough success right now to completely negate their chance to even come into existence. And that's true for business. It's true for relationships. It's true for health. Sometimes I'm asked, like, what are the situations do a day applies to, and what are the situations it doesn't? I still haven't found where it doesn't. There are things I wasn't sure about, but people have come into my life since I put out the book, whether it's coaching or just reaching out to me, that they're talking about their situation. I was like, I wasn't sure if it would work in that kind of setting. Maybe it's too extreme, or, someone who's dealing with cancer, or someone who I didn't lose my wife who actually did lose their wife. So it actually can apply across the board. And the second piece of it is that first word, do, that's a verb. As you take action every day in support of the intention, in support of that goal that you've set, and go out and do what you need to do today in support of that goal, free from whether you've done it or not before, or how well or poorly you've done it before, and free from how many more times you're going to have to do it again later, tomorrow, or if you're going to fail sometime down the road. None of that matters, because none of it's happening.
So it's this idea, so the day is the idea of just being present, recognizing that we are, this is what we have now. We have this moment, we have this day. There's kind of precious to us as well. And the do is the kind of the activating part as well. I'm wondering though, when a lot of people, they're okay, I have my day. This is my day. I'm able to kind of focus on doing my best work, but I've got lots of do's in my list. Mm-hmm. There are. Do you talk in the book about how to, when there feels like there's too many do's for the one day? How you decide on what to do and what don't to do? That's the worst possible grammar that I've just said there, but I'm going to put it out there anyway.
You're talking to an American, so I wouldn't know that was programming. That's a really important point. And actually, it's funny. I don't go into that too much in the book, because the chapter on setting that intention on that goals is meant to be quite directive about the real true things, the direction that you want to get your life to. And so it's focused on not the little things, but the ultimate life-changing kind of goals. So the presumption in talking about that is the other things drop off, but that's perhaps unfair and unrealistic, because there's always noise. So what's ironic is that's actually what I've been writing about a lot lately in some of my articles. The last article that I did for Inc. was all about burnout. And it's from this sort of place of, doing too much and getting caught up in the whirlwind of it all. So there are a number of ways that you can try to control for that. One is to set priorities and just religiously and ruthlessly defend them. So, I block out time in my diary to make sure that I can actually work on what I care about. And invariably, the phone is ringing and someone's emailing me about, can we move the interview to this time? And it happens to be in that moment. So you have to ask yourself is, what's more important to me, the thing I blocked the time for, or this? Mm-hmm. And it could be one of those things. Maybe that's one of your bigger goals. But if it isn't, then you need to have enough self-love not to feel like you have to give in on what matters to you. And somehow I promise you the world will continue to turn despite how it may seem. It's not the end of the world. Like, people will still breathe and the business will not fold or whatever it is that is trying to encroach on the time. But you have to defend that really, really tooth and nail. And the more you do that, actually, the more people will respect the time that you've set and they'll stop trying to press into it. But we usually start from a place of saying yes to everything and taking work calls on the weekends and at nights and all that. As soon as you put those barriers away, people will just continue to encroach on them. So it's about setting the right kind of priorities and barriers, but then stick by it.
So once you kind of have your priorities set, you have in a better place that's coming from a place of self-love and really understanding what your why, and you've set your intention. I'm wondering, are there any kind of online tools or resources or mobile apps that you find very useful for just maybe helping ensure that you do the first things first, each of your day, as a productivity apps, for example?
Yeah, there are definitely a bunch of them. I have to admit, I'm not savvy on what the different tools are out there, which ones seem to work. I'm in a mastermind group where some of our members are using some of those tools, and I haven't really heard from them on whether they're good or not. One of them I think does really like something, and it's basically a way to more intelligently manage her diary or her calendar with this tool, understanding what her priorities are and the way it color codes things and all that. So I can ask her, and if you want to put in the show notes or something, we could do that. I'm not a big fan of tools like that. It's just not how my brain tends to work, and I recognize that some people are and some aren't. So I deal with more of the introspective kind of, let's shift your thinking and your values, but some people still need the tool. So there are some out there for sure. I'm not up enough on what they are. And
what about on the writing? You mentioned writing for ink. You've got your book. I'm sure you're always working on the next project as well. Is there a particular tool that you use for your writing?
So I go back to my values. I write from what I know. So I write from a place of inspiration. So I don't really need to worry about, some people are like, you need to plan out your content calendar, and that's all good stuff. But I write about my beliefs and my views on things. So it's much easier for me to sit down and put out some really meaningful pieces. I don't have to do a lot of research and see, what are trending topics that people want me to write about. So that means some of my articles may not really resonate with people. That's fine. If they resonate with a couple of people in a meaningful way, that's worth more to me. And other ones like this burnout piece, it's just been huge. Like the number of shares and reads is like 10 times what my articles normally get, which is really funny. It's sad actually. We're all sort of burnt out. But I think a piece of it's just I've been vulnerable with that because that's my life. I still have a very full day job, and I'm promoting the book and doing this coaching and all that. So I sort of have two very full day jobs, and I'm also still a husband and father. So I have sort of like 3 80-hour-a-week day jobs. And if you don't know the math, there's not actually that much time. So it's been tricky.
And unfortunately, cloning hasn't quite hit the market yet. So
I'm all for that when that comes through. Yeah.
And if you could recommend just one record and one book, one album and one book to our listeners, what would they be?
So there's an album by this hip hop artist who's also a yoga teacher and philosopher. His name's MC Yogi, and his album Only Love Is Real it's really good music. And the message is really valuable. And I did an interview with him for my show that'll be coming out in a few months, but he's brilliant. So that's on the music side. Of course, if you don't like hip hop, that wouldn't really fly, but it's good music. And then on the book, there's one book I always recommend, and I think people are shocked it's not mine. That's the second book I'd recommend, but the first is called Open Heart, Clear Mind by a Buddhist monk named Thubten Chodron. It's life-changing, and it's just one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. It's a way to introduce Buddhism to you without pushing religion or anything like that. I mean, it is a religion, but it's not about that so much as the philosophy behind it and the way of viewing the world. If you take it from that perspective, you set aside whether you believe in your God or their God or whatever. It's just really brilliant stuff, and that can lead to quite a shift in how you relate to the world, and it's worth it.
Great. I'll put these all in the show notes as well. People to jamestaylor.me and just look for these show notes. You'll be able to find them as well. Final a question for you here, Bryan. Let's imagine you woke up tomorrow morning and you had to start from scratch. So you have all the tools of your trade, all the knowledge that you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you. You know no one. You have to completely restart. What would you do? How would you restart?
Wow. I would put my book out, which I didn't know anyone and no one knew me when I did that. I would do the same thing all over again. I would do it better this time. I've learned a lot about, social media and that sort of thing, but I didn't publish my book to make money selling books. I published my book because I know that it can change lives. I've seen it firsthand through my coaching work. I mean, I was doing this for several years before the book came out. That's my intention. Even if it's one other person, that's fine. So I would still do that. And I'm content with that. I always said, like, if no one bought it, I got so much out of writing the book that I'm good. Now I knew at least my mother would buy it and my father probably would too. So 2 people would buy it. But beyond that, I just, if there's just one person who I wouldn't have been able to touch in another way, that makes it all worth it. And it's very hard to feel differently about that. So I would still write the book and put it out there and just hope, there's one download or purchase that, someone just takes it into their life and lets it start to change how they're doing.
Well, Bryan, it's been a pleasure speaking to you today. If people want to kind of connect with you, learn more about the book, and some of and your coaching and other things that you've got happening, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so there's 2 sites. The easiest one is probably doadaybook.com. It's a book called Do a Day, so hopefully that's easy to remember and spell. And I link up all my social media, and you can buy the book. It's at every bookseller globally, so that's it's easy to find in every sort of format: ebook, audio, print, etc. And then I have a site of my own, bryanfalchuk.com. So you can find the book there. I'm working on my second book, so it will also be linked up there. But then you got to learn how to spell my name. So probably doadaybook.com is the easiest way.
Well, Bryan, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, your creative life as well. I wish you all the best with your writing, your public speaking. I know you've got a lot of other kind of projects on the go just now as well, but thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, James.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.